evening and welcome back. So, the narrative to subvert Britain is ever undergoing, and as we see here, British and minority ethnic people said to feature on British notes and coins. And of course, on the outset with a lot of these things, and this included, it seems reasonable. You go, well, yes, of course. You've got all sorts of people that have contributed to Britain, that have worked in order to further the cause for Britain, and they're worth being appreciated. I mean, who can argue with that? And on the surface level, then yes, of course, that seems very sensible, and of course we should appreciate the people who have come before us in order to provide the life that we now live. So yes, this seems very sensible. Case closed. Except, of course, it's not as easy as first thought. The whole endeavour in all of these things with the black, Asian, minority ethnic figures is just to subvert the narrative of Britain and to try and say Britain wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for the foreigners, if it wasn't for the black, Asian and minority ethnic figures, the BAME people, then Britain would have never established anything. We are so reliant on these countries and the people of whom we colonized, essentially, that if it wasn't for them, then we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. If it wasn't for the fact that we were able to colonize countries after becoming a global superpower and being the strongest empire in the world, then we would never have been able to become the strongest empire in the world. It kind of falls down on even the smallest of closer inspection. But worse than that, of course, it is not at all to exalt the individuals who have done well. Not at all. It is to degrade British ancestry. It is to say that, oh, you think you're proud to be British? Well, you've got fuck all to be proud of. You colonise, which, obviously means rape, pillage, looting and killing people. It definitely doesn't mean building the best railways and transportation that they've ever seen and still use to this day, and bringing them out of poverty, which is the more accurate route. And therefore, anything that British people did is clearly a net negative, because that is the narrative which they're trying to draw. So, should BAME people be mentioned on British currency? Well, if they did something worthwhile for Britain, chances are they did something worthwhile for the world. That's pretty bloody obvious. Britain is a small country and incredibly successful. The things that British people have done, which are memorable the world over because they are revolutionary. Therefore, if somebody is on the British notes or coins, chances are they're recognisable the world over. The main one, of course, being Queen Elizabeth II, of whom we all know and love, and other pertinent figures include people like Charles Darwin, who was the godfather of evolution, if you will. So, yes, he's pretty well known the world over. So when it comes to more obscure people, then do they need to be on the British legal tender? Not really. If they're citizens of their own country, and then they left to a different country and did well for that country, then, of course, they can be recorded within their own legal tender. Again, when it comes to Darwin, he was known, of course, for the Galapagos Islands, which are owned by, I believe it's Ecuador. It's in South America. But whoever may own them, they're not British. But it was from the finches on the island that he got the idea of evolution from, and looked into it even more so from that. And it's not as if we're saying, oh, all South American currency must include Darwin because he did stuff within your territory. No, of course not. Instead, it's Britain. That he left Britain, found examples of evolution, and we're proud of him, and therefore put him on our currency. It really is that simple. So the same goes for other countries. If you come from another country and you go, yes, we like this person, then by all means put them on your currency. But it must be remembered of what is the purpose of currency. And it is tragically hilarious how Benjamin Franklin is on the American currency on the notes. Given that, of course, he was against any form of fiat currency. And I thought, no. If you have currency, then it's got to be the value of the coin itself, of whatever precious metal it is made of. That is going to be the value of the coin. He was a strong believer in the gold standard, if you will. And therefore, it's just ease of use to print the value of the coin on the coin itself. So then, to put them on paper money is really a punch in the face for what he was arguing for. But nonetheless, that's where he is now. Ended up. But again, it comes down to what is it that you wish to depict on your legal tender? What is the reason for putting somebody on your notes or your coins? The point, as far as I can tell, is that the idea is they push forward technological advancement. Therefore, if they're on your notes, it is because they were one of the reasons that you have those notes in the first place. They are the reason for that currency to be in circulation. So if you go with a lesser well-known people, then the chances of them being necessary to be included in your tender is highly unlikely. But nonetheless, Chancellor Rishi Sunak is considering proposals from a campaign group for legal tender to be more inclusive, which means fewer white British people, fewer indigenous people. That's what inclusive means. Just so that there isn't any ambiguity. Inclusive means fewer indigenous British people. Mr. Sunak has asked the Royal Mint to come up with new designs honouring BAME figures. Military nurse Mary Seacole and spy Noor Inayat Khan are being considered. The former Conservative parliamentary candidate Zira Zaidi is leading the Banknotes of Colour campaign. It's almost a joke at this point. There is nothing at all that is beyond reproach for these people. And I don't have any particular qualms with knowing that foreign people helped Britain. Of course, that is what you'd hope and what you would expect. But put simply, if you move to a country because you think it is far better for yourself and then for your children, chances are you wish to do well so that you are appreciated throughout your life and maybe afterwards. But because you appreciate the country of where you're moving to and you want to honour that culture, you think that is a good way of doing things and you wish to assimilate and be a part of it. So the idea of trying to subvert that by saying that foreigners are vitally important into that country's narrative really misses the point. That I don't think any immigrant who moved to Britain hoping for a better life and then achieved a better life by providing more value than they take, as is necessary under a capitalist system, that they're not going to be thinking, oh yes, I also wish to turn this whole country upside down and rearrange their priorities so that they value things differently, because of course it is within the culture at the time that they made their success, and that is what they were predicting and hoping for and working towards in order to get the life that they were looking for. So subverting this isn't just doing a disservice to the indigenous British people, of whom are overlooked so bloody much in how to keep the country going, but even to the people that you think you're supposed to be kind of respecting by adding them to the currency. That any immigrant worth their salt who's thinking of assimilating would not want to subvert the narrative of that country by including something that tries to degrade the indigenous population. That is not why they moved to Britain and why they try to support it. So even in your wishy-washy liberal leftist ways, you're still doing something wrong, even against the person that you think in your fucking backwards way you're trying to respect or show appreciation for. And that is why, yet again, this is just a subversive push that they've tried to find another angle to come in at in order to try and remove any sense of British identity and what it means to be British and proud of your country and your heritage. That I understand no country is perfect. Of course not. But if you wish to pick a country which has, even despite its small size, lifted the most amount of people out of poverty, it's revolutionized the way that the world works. It has brought freedom to far-reaching corners of the globe. It has destroyed slave trades and encouraged people to develop their own ideals and do what it is that brings happiness to themselves and their family, and provided the freedom in order for them to establish it. The country that has established the highest rate of individual happiness the world over in a variety of political, social and economical terms, then that's got to be Britain. And don't you fucking dare suggest that this was all because of immigrants that have popped up centuries after the process was begun. Because that's bullshit. The British ethos has been revolutionary the world over. It is incredibly powerful. It has been used by North America, of course, to great extent. And bear in mind, it is freedom-loving enough that the Commonwealth still use our reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, on their currency as well, and still honour the monarch because of the freedom permitted within the Commonwealth, even though it entails about a sixth of the world that Queen Elizabeth II owns. So yes, these Enlightenment values are pretty bloody powerful and worth remembering, and not something that can be swept under the rug by trying to subvert the ideals of Britain and say, oh, you clearly needed foreigners to establish this, because no, we bloody didn't. That's not to say they didn't help. It's not to say they didn't have a worthwhile impact. But the whole idea is to continue the ideals of Britain. And ideas are amazing things, so by all means contribute and understand that that is there. But if you're working towards empowering Britain, then you've got to do something that is worthwhile and for the sake of Britain. But the people they mention here of a spy and a nurse aren't quite of the caliber we're looking for to use on our legal tender. So, as they say here, they're looking for the British World War II secret agent, Noor Inayat Khan, who was the first female radio operator to be sent to enemy-occupied France. And you know it's not good when they use so many qualifiers. It's not the first person sent into enemy occupation. No, it's the first female radio operator to be sent to enemy-occupied France, and one of only 4 women in history to receive the George Cross. Wow. That's not nearly as good as the Victoria Cross, and only 4 women. Are you saying there have only been 4 women brave enough to receive that? Dear God, because that's the civilian alternative of the Victoria Cross, essentially. And by God, if you want to see British standards of bravery, then please do look into the Victoria Cross. If you want to look into what made Britain great, and the standard of which we should really be aspiring to, then look into the people who received the Victoria Cross. And those men are outstanding. Why the fuck do we not see them being put forward for our legal tender then? Bear in mind, lot of them were awarded posthumously after they died, after they made the ultimate sacrifice. So don't you bloody dare come at me with a huge qualifier for somebody who was one of 4 women to receive the George Cross when it comes to the hundreds of men died who received the Victoria Cross. There's no comparison. And then also they mentioned the Jamaican-born nurse, Mary Seacole, who was born in the Caribbean to a Scottish father and a Jamaican mother. After the outbreak of the Crimean War, she travelled to England hoping to join Florence Nightingale's team of nurses, but was turned down and travelled to Crimea herself and established the British Hotel, somewhere the soldiers could rest and enjoy a good meal. I'm not quite seeing the revolutionary act here. Not quite seeing the thing that we could look on to be proud of our British heritage as we use that legal tender. But, of course, that's not the point. That, yes, they've been used on commemorative coins, but Ms. Zaidi says commemorative coins are not the same as legal tender because legal tender acts as a passport, an ambassador, because nothing will ever be good enough. And if you start using some of their spokespeople for your legal tender, then they'll want all of it to be there. And at this point, I'm just going to say no. So they say, we must tell the story of inclusive representation as it matters for cohesion and it matters in the narrative of who we are as a nation. Firstly, fuck you. As in, actually fuck you. But secondly, how dare you? That when you're saying the story of inclusive representation as it matters for cohesion, that if somebody does well, they are rewarded. They have to do incredibly well, amazingly well, to be recognised for such prestigious recognition of being on a legal tender. And it doesn't matter if they're men, women, whoever they might be, they have to have done something amazingly well for Britain. None of the candidates you've suggested have done that. So they don't deserve to be there. And we say it matters as in the narrative of who we are as a nation. Well, again, these people you mention don't matter in the narrative of who we are as a nation. Not at all. And then you're trying to mention somebody who was turned down by Florence Nightingale. Well, how the hell does that help your cause of being inclusive? It doesn't sort of... What the fuck are you coming from? You're not coming as being inclusive representation. Not at all. The entire point is to say we've got to pick these people who aren't indigenous British because then we can say just how bad the white people are and how appalling they would be if they didn't have us minorities helping them every step of the way because they clearly need this. Even though it is blatantly bullshit. But they're going to keep trying to do this until it is vociferously stamped out. And that is, of course, what we're trying to do here. To say, yes, there have been many, many, many amazing people the world over. No question about it whatsoever. How many people have been responsible for Britain doing well and are revolutionising the way we think and the way we work? Not that many. Are these people worthy of remembrance in order to be inspired by them and to do something equally memorable and revolutionary? Yes, of course. And they are the people of whose memory we wish to honour. Not a couple of women that we've never heard of. That is not the point. Not at all. If you want to go for someone who's persecuted, then, of course, Alan Turing is a good example of that with the Enigma machine and the godfather of computers. That makes a lot of sense. But for somebody who was turned down by Florence Nightingale to open a British hotel, that pales in comparison. So for everybody else, keep fighting the good fight. Understand why you can be proud to be British and the great ancestry that you come from, and therefore the genes that are within you in order to do better and spread those Enlightenment values to allow freedom to everybody on every corner of the globe and do something worthwhile. But as always, until next time, have a good one.